Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I will turn off the comments. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good night. Or not night yet, but it's quite late for some of you. We're going to talk today about what makes a good teacher. But let me just say to start out with, this is not just for teachers or future teachers. This live is for anyone interested in leading a group of people and maintaining respect. So whether that's in business, whether that's in law, whether it's in sports, or any sort of leadership position socially, this live is very important. But of course, I will address it towards teachers. So it will be applicable to teachers, but transferable. Transfer is to change from one to another. Transferable to other professions. Let's get started. I want to give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. Here are the 9 factors that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to explain in some detail what each of these I believe are critical. Now, these are gathered from my own experience, the experience of others, obviously, and how I see how these qualities can affect your teaching and your reputation, and more importantly, how they can affect your students, or if you're a manager or a director, how they can affect your association or your group or your company. So we're going to look at these 9 things. The last 3 deal specifically with online presence. So a lot of teachers have moved to Zoom or to online social apps or some sort of online web app. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you what I think have been very effective for me, the sort of key ideas that we need to be aware of, because the dynamics, as many of us know, are different online than they are off. If you have a question during this live, please push the box that has the question mark in it at the bottom of your screen. Push that and you can ask a question, and then I can look at the questions. So let's begin. So what are the general qualities that we want to have as effective teachers? Number 1 habit, and pretty much in order of importance, the number 1 habit is to know your subject well. If we're called upon to teach, it's because we have something to share. If you don't have anything to share, then there's no point being a teacher. Now, some of us, young people in particular, confuse these different skills. They will confuse being charismatic. They will confuse being a polished speaker. Polished means very good. P-O-L-I-S-H-E-D. That's polished. To be a polished speaker is to be a very good one. But if you're a polished speaker or charismatic, this does not make you a good teacher necessarily. The first thing you need to have is something, knowledge, experiences that you can then share with others. And so you need to know your subject well. And we have a corollary. A corollary is something it's a term in logic, in science. A corollary is something that's related to the first principle. And so habit 1A is a corollary of habit 1. And that is that you not only teach the knowledge you've learned, but you teach it from your own perspective. So an excellent teacher teaches the subject from their own perspective. That is to say, they own it. You can tell if you know something very well by your ability to just talk about it naturally in your own words, or do you need to constantly look at the book in order for the book to guide you? So I've made on the right here 2 arrows. They're contrasting. A lot of teachers are relaying information. To relay information is you take the source, you think about then you just memorize it, or you more or less just pass it on to the students. The best teachers will repackage. So at Christmas we package presents, but or for birthdays or any anniversaries or weddings, we package a present. We also package or repackage, if we're teachers, if we're good teachers, we repackage information into our own words. So when you own it, when you're able to say it, whatever the subject is, in your own words, this is much more effective. Students will feel that you know it, and when you know it that well, guess what? You will automatically be more excited about it. All right. Now, the content for today is how to be an effective teacher. We've talked about that. All right, keep asking questions. I will answer the relevant ones in the box. So this is really important. This step is difficult and separates teachers from excellent teachers. Excellent teachers can put the concepts, even if they're difficult, into their own words and relay it to the student in ways that make sense and are clear. And as I mentioned in an earlier video on my profile, it doesn't matter how difficult the subject, everything has a clear explanation. If you're not able to explain things clearly, it's because you don't know the information well enough. That's okay, but that's a check on how well you know it. All right, let's continue. Habit number 2 is explaining just what I mentioned, explaining things clearly using clear examples. The longer I teach, the more experience I accrue. Accrue is a great word. ACCRUE. The more experience I accrue means to add, to gain. The more experience I accrue, I'm convinced that the best teachers are the clearest. They explain things clearly, unambiguously. That's not to say the subject is easy, but your ability to take a difficult subject or a moderately difficult subject and make it clear for everyone to understand is a gift that you want to aspire to. This is a great word. To aspire to means to reach for. It's to dream, it's your goal. Aspire. ASPIRE. Aspire to. This is what you want to aspire to. There's nothing noble about being recondite. No, that's too big a word. There's nothing noble about being complicated in your explanations. Nobody wins when it's complicated. Be clear. Be clear, but clarity is not easy. I will tell you, it's not easy. It requires you to fully understand a subject, put it in your own words, and then explain it to the students at the right sort of situation they're at. And finally, answer questions directly and clearly. Students ask questions for a reason. And these are big clues for teachers on where the class is at intellectually or academically. These are big hints, and it's up to us to answer them very clearly and very directly. I see often teachers will take a question and then they will spin a whole story and they will answer very indirectly. This doesn't help the student. And in fact, it sometimes has the opposite effect. It frustrates students because they think, well, what about my question? So answer it clearly, then you can go off on rabbit trails. Rabbit trails we learned about 2 months ago. If you go on a rabbit trail, you take a detour. You talk about something that is not directly relevant. So if you want to go on a rabbit trail, and lots of teachers like to do this, I don't recommend it, by the way. But if you do, first answer the questions directly and clearly. Okay, let me look. Speaking of questions, I see some questions in the box. Corollary is corollary, Allary, I think. Someone can check that. Oh, great, thank you. Okay, let me see here. Someone has asked a really interesting question about eye contact. I think eye contact is important, but let me tell you what is not. Let me put this question up. So here's a question. What do you think about eye contact? Is it important? I think eye contact is very important to keep students interested. If you're looking at them, it keeps them interested. They can't fall asleep as easily. Now, here's the problem. Or not the problem, but the trick. You can't just look at two people for an hour or for the whole class. You have to look at, we say to pan the room. To pan the room, P-A-N. If you pan the room, you go back and forth. So when you're teaching, you should pan the room and not just look at two people, because then this will actually have the opposite effect. Everyone else will think, oh, does the teacher only like them? What about us? And so this is off-putting. This is another great word, off-putting, O-F-F dash putting, P-U-T-T-I-N-G. If something is off-putting, it puts you off. You become less interested, and you can become offended if you're off-put. So you don't want to just look at two or three people. The trick or the key with eye contact is to try to look at everyone in the room. This is difficult for some people because they can only think in one stream at a time. So they're thinking about their subject, they're not thinking about the room or the conditions in the room. But this can be practiced and honed. Honed is a great word, H-O-N-E-D. Something that's honed is improved. This can be honed. You can hone this skill. You hone skills. This skill can be honed, but it takes practice. I've honed this skill in class, and if there are any students of mine here, hopefully they will be able to vouch. Vouch for something is to support it, to vouch for. Hopefully they can vouch for that. But it takes practice. It's like riding a bicycle for the first time. It's very uncoordinated. You're very uncoordinated and you fall because you have lots of things to think about at once. And when you're lecturing or speaking and trying to look evenly throughout the room, this also takes coordination, like riding a bike, and you need to practice it. But it can be learned and improved. All right. Let me see about... Okay, someone has asked, what is a corollary? That's how you spell corollary, I think. A corollary is a science term that you use, and also you use it in logic. And it's when you have a principle or a law, and then a law that's probably not proven yet. I think that's what it is. It's like a secondary law or a secondary idea. I've used it as a secondary idea related to the principle or primary idea. And so the corollary so the first principle I mentioned was know your subject well. The corollary to that principle is to know your subject well. The corollary is to internalize it and make it your own. In other words, don't relay information, but repackage it and make it your own. That's when you know you own it, when you're able to say it in your own words. So that's a corollary. Oh gosh, these are great questions. I'm just trying to see if I can read. Some of these are really small. Okay, this is an interesting question. A gesture. Emblems I'm not sure about, but gestures. So my hands are gestures. Now, I believe that I use too many gestures. So I have to be careful about my gestures. I also notice when I get excited when I'm teaching, I rock to rock back and forth. I don't think those are good habits, and I'm trying to improve them. So I try not to use as many gestures, but I know that gestures like this here can be very effective when you want to make a really important point. So what gestures can do is accent or underscore or emphasize. These are all synonyms. Accent, underscore, emphasize an important point that you want to make. And so gestures can be very effective if, here's the caveat, if they're not overused. So we have to be very careful about gestures, and I have to be very careful about gestures because I tend, unfortunately, to overuse them, which lets you know that we're all learning. I'm actively trying to improve my teaching method, which includes working on making fewer gestures, not less gestures, but fewer, because we can count them. All right. Great questions. Let's see if we have any other interesting questions. I will save the broadcast. This will be saved. All right. All right, I'm going to move on to the next habit here. Here's a key observation to habit number 2. The key observation is that it's better to know a smaller area of knowledge well than less clear in a larger area of knowledge. So in other words, if you know something really well, it's better to have a smaller area that you know well than a larger area that you know less well, because reputation favors clarity. I'll say it again, reputation favors clarity. In other words, what that means is that your reputation is built more on your being clear than your being knowledgeable. That's, I think, an important thing to remember. Habit number 3. Make learning fun. How do you make learning fun? I'm going to just tell you how I believe it's done. I think learning becomes fun for the student if they genuinely feel that the subject is interesting and fun for the teacher. Students are smart. They have intuition. They can see. They have eyes. They know when somebody's bored. And if somebody's bored, guess what? You will also be bored. It's osmosis. It happens very naturally. So you make learning fun by being excited about your subject. Now, here's the $1 million question. Well, how do I get excited about a subject I don't really like? This is a challenge for all teachers, and I would submit that it's a challenge for all students as well. Because it's just like in life, in your career, you're going to have tasks and job assignments that you don't like. This is something we have to be able to deal with. I can tell you how I deal with it. One of my secrets is if I don't like a subject, so teaching grammar, I know grammar pretty well. I don't like to teach grammar so much, but let me tell you how I make it interesting. I focus on things that I can learn. Because I know me, if I'm learning something, I'm excited. I'm more motivated. And so I try to ask myself when I approach grammar as a subject, all right, what can I learn in this field, in this area? And suddenly I become a lot more interested. So that's how I do it. I try to find something new or interesting because for me, I always like to learn and improve. This, I think, will keep the subject fresh and exciting. All right. We have a lot of questions, but I want to move to habit 4. Now, this is where we start to get controversial. I'm going to speak very directly to the teachers because this is a sin, I'll call it a sin in religious terms, that teachers often make. The next 2 habits actually. Regularly checks and assesses students' understanding. So you're giving constant feedback. We don't want surprises. If a student's surprised by their low score, it's mainly the teacher's fault. They should have let them know step by step that the student is not meeting the standards. There should be no surprises. I'm not saying that it's the teacher's fault if the student fails. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you give early feedback, early assessment, students know where they stand in your subject and there are no surprises. When there are big surprises at the end of the semester or at the end of the course with your grade, it's often negative and it doesn't reflect well on the teacher. So give early assessment and that avoids problems later. A bad habit that I see is tricking students to show one's superiority. And that leads me to actually habit number 5. So I want to talk about this in relation to habit number 5, tricking students. In other words, when it comes to the test, you give them a test on subject or material that you didn't specifically and directly cover in class and in the homework. I am not a big fan of tricking students. It creates lots of bad aspects in the classroom. And I'll tell you why. So the other thing is give homework that directly corresponds to what you've been teaching in class. Now this even boils down to examples. Let me give you an example because this is really important and a lot of teachers miss this. I've been teaching on a certain subject, let's say simple past, and I'm using several examples. Now, when I give homework, I will start the homework with exactly the same pattern that I taught in the class. I want students to see the relationship between the class and the homework. What I see a lot of teachers do is they give completely different homework and expect the students to make the connections. And that is unfair for most students. You start with examples that are directly parallel of a similar structure, of a similar format to what you've been teaching. You want to build students' confidence. You don't want to confuse them or frustrate them. So then you can gradually get more difficult or maybe at the end challenge them to think outside the box. That's fine. But tricking them, making it unrelated to what you discussed in class is unfair, and it's a very poor pedagogical practice. You don't want to do this if you're a teacher. Now, I can tell you why teachers do this. Because teachers, especially young teachers, want to feel needed and important. And if you trick the students, guess what? You're their only hope, you the teacher. And so the students will come to you saying, we didn't understand, can you help us? And then a teacher feels more important. I'm telling you that this self-importance needs to stay out of the classroom. It is a bad pedagogical habit that you don't want to get involved in. So let me explain the key observations. No surprises. Success by the students builds their confidence. And confident students perform better and are more successful. And ultimately, this reflects on you, the teacher. And this is what you want. You don't want dependent students because you've tricked them. You want students that are sort of self-starters that feel confident that can do things on their own. These two habits, 4 and 5, are super critical. And I want teachers to reflect on this because I often see these being transgressed. Transgressed is a great word. I will tell you, transgressed is a transgression is like an error, or in religion, it's a sin or something you shouldn't do. Transgressions. All right, let's take a look at some of the questions. Thank you. We can do a selfie. Sing, Gerlin, thank you. All right, let me just look here for a few questions. Now, this is a great question. the one we often have to deal with. How do we keep students focused during a long class? Well, I can tell you there are several things, but what one leading educator has suggested, I think it's a good idea, is she likes to change like the subject or change the topic every 20 minutes. So within an hour and a half class, you have 4 classes or 5 mini classes. And this keeps students, active, attentive, and fresh. I tend to not do that. I try to rely on my enthusiasm and my engagement. But I think, and it works for me, but I can say that this changing, if it's structured changing, not random changing, structured changing where you've planned it ahead of time, can be very effective in keeping students focused. Let's take a look at another question. Yeah, this is a great question. Anna has asked this in Tumen. Hello, Anna. Is reflection after each class important? I'm going to go one step further and say that reflection after each class is important. And what I do at university is I reflect at the beginning of each class on last week's class. Because guess what? Students forgot last week's class. And you have to remind them about it. It's not that they don't care, but when they're receiving information, a lot of information for the first time, we need to repeat it as often as possible. So I try to have a wind up at the end. Not always, I have to say, I have to get better at that. But at the beginning of each class, I try to do a review of what we covered last week or last class, because it's very helpful for students. And then what you do is you relate last week's to this week's subject. And then suddenly students start to see the logicality of your course. Great question. Okay, now this is I think a very fair question, because what I suggested earlier, I think this comment by somebody, Mehdi, thank you, is in response to when I said you have to own it and you can't just relay information, but you have to own it and put it in your own words. Obviously, there are formulas in science and equations in math that you can't put in your own words. You have to simply relay it or show them, because these things are highly technical. And in that sense, you just show them. You don't even have to sort of even relay it. You just show them if it's very complicated. But what you can do as an effective teacher is contextualize that very complicated formula into something that the students can relate to. And so that's important. So it's not the technical stuff then. You relay that, obviously, but you contextualize it into something students can relate to. Oftentimes, I will tell you, the most effective is telling them why this is important, because students are asking this in every subject. Why do I need to learn this? And what we can do as teachers to make students more interested and more engaged is show them how it's so very relevant. So what I've tried to do in this live is to suggest that the principles I'm using or that I'm going to talk about today are relevant not just for teachers, but for anyone pursuing a leadership position in any organization. So I've tried to repackage and make this live relevant. And I think you can do that in everything every subject you're sort of approaching. All right, great question. I'm going to move on and I will continue this in just a moment. So next we have, this is one that I think is dependent on the subject. A good teacher, an excellent teacher, encourages students to think independently and take intellectual risks. Now let me tell you where I've had most success in this aspect. It builds on the habits 4 and 5. When students have confidence in the subject you're teaching them, they are more willing to take risks. Students who have failed or don't understand the homework or are confused will not take any risks. And or they won't think independently because they're dependent on the teacher who probably hasn't been clear enough in the first place. And this creates a codependency that you don't want as a teacher. So the way I have found students to think, to get them to think independently, is to encourage them to do it by showing examples. I will think independently, and then I will show them how they can do it too. I will draw out or encourage them, because every student has a different set of skills, and when you know them well, you can draw it out and say, I know you're good at this because I've seen it in your homework. What do you think? How could we make this different? And so you encourage them to try. Some will naturally try. Some are natural risk takers. Others are not. All right, let's go to habit 7. Now, these are for the online world, because some of us are teaching online. We're not teaching in class. So here we have habit number 7 for online. I think this is really critical. Don't put text on your PowerPoints. Very few words. You're going to put students to sleep. Clear presentations have few words, catchy words that then you can explain the rest, the context. So don't put a lot of words in your PowerPoint. You'll lose the students. Secondly, engage the students in the lesson. One way is to have them turn on their camera. Another way is to ask them questions directly. And then finally, begin on time. If you don't begin on time, students will not come on time, and guess what? They will gradually not show up. I've seen it. Attendance is the biggest issue in these online courses, online classes at university and school. Attendance is the issue. So what you don't want to do is give students an excuse not to attend. So they could say, well, I waited 5 minutes and you weren't there. So begin on time, set a precedent, and don't give them excuses not to attend. All right, I'm going to take the final minutes here and answer more questions. So let me see here if we have... Oh, I'm not sure. A check on it. So I'm just reading some of the questions. Let's start with this one. This is an interesting one. If we were in a live discussion, I would ask you to answer this question. Elmira, thank you. How do you motivate your students as a teacher? I think the number one motivation is your enthusiasm for the subject. If you like the subject, students will like the subject. I teach academic writing and a history course at university, and I think my academic writing, which students don't like academic writing, but when you're excited about it, guess what? They start to like academic writing because you put a spin on it. When you put a spin on something, that means you package it in a way, you discuss it in a way that's interesting. And they become interested, and they want to become better writers. This is how you inspire students. First, with enthusiasm. Well, first with knowledge, and then clarity, and then enthusiasm, as I mentioned earlier. Let's ask another question. Saeed, you asked a question. I don't quite catch that. I don't remember that part. I'm sorry. All right, let me go through here. We have a lot of questions. Abira, thank you for that comment. Someone's asked about improving your accent. I'm going to do a few videos on accents. I'm getting a lot of requests. I'm going to do a few videos that will hopefully help you improve your accent as it's improved mine. I didn't always speak like I do now. I will help that. Yeah, this is okay. Someone remembers that. Very good, Sarah. Did you say that honed is a synonym for improve? So if I hone a skill, I improve it. And we often talk about honing. We collocate that with a skill. So you can hone your skills. This is just a nice word. And so I used it there. Improve or hone your skills. All right, I'm just looking through some of the questions. Let me see. Someone's asked about confidence. I'm not going to post the question, but I think confidence as a teacher comes with practice. I think all of us who are teachers know that. It also comes when you know your subject well. In other words, when you're prepared. The better you're prepared, the more confident you are. Oh, this is really interesting. This is a great question because it doesn't have an easy answer. And great questions are often of this ilk. Ilk is a type. It's a very old, antiquated word that I love to use. Ilk, I-L-K, 3 letters. Good questions often don't have straightforward answers because they're asking questions that sort of divide things and make them more interesting. How do we handle bad audience engagement? I have evolved, E-V-O-L-V-E. I have evolved in my approach to this. When I was younger, I reacted poorly to bad engagement. Now what I do, because I teach university students, so I have an advantage. I'm not babysitting them. They're adults and I don't have to take care of them. I can fail them. So what I do now is I focus on the students who are interested in learning. And the others, I just assume, I take actually a more understanding assumption. I assume that they're busy, they're tired, they may not like the course, they may have a lot on their mind. I give them the benefit of the doubt and I try not to judge them, but I focus my attention on those who want to learn, and life is easy. And so you don't offend those who aren't listening, but you don't lose your energy on them either. And I think this is really important. All right, let me see here. Any other little final questions before we go? Someone's asked a very good question, how to make students remember more information. Well, introduce the topic, discuss the topic, review at the end of the class what you've discussed, give them homework that reinforces the topic, and then discuss the topic at the beginning of the next class. That's 5 iterations. Iteration is a great word, by the way. I-T-E-R. A-T-I-O-N, iteration. Those are 5 iterations, and that's a lot of repetition within 2 class periods, and students can often remember things much longer after the 5th time. All right. A few of these I think this is a common issue for most of us who are non-native speakers. How to speak English fluently while keeping in mind grammar mistakes. I think just practicing and making mistakes, not accepting those mistakes, but knowing they're going to happen and try to improve them afterwards. So let me give you an example from my sort of world. I know that I'm not giving perfect presentations, especially if you look at my earlier videos. So I understand that, just like you know that you're going to make grammar mistakes. I'm making some video mistakes and my gestures and things. But here's what I can do. I can review the video and try to improve. So here's the advice, I guess. Accept where you're at. Don't be angry. Don't be upset. Don't be jealous about someone else. Accept where you're at and then try to make regular improvement. I think if I can give you one secret to it, to the extent I'm a good teacher, to that extent, and who knows if I am or not, but if I am it's because of, I think, one reason. I always strive is to try hard. I always strive to improve. So I analyze the videos and I try to not make the same mistakes. That's all I can do, and that's all you can do. Have an assessment after the end of something, and then make the improvement. Don't just assess, but then make the improvement. And I think that's a skill I have perfected. Perfected means that I'm always assessing myself and trying to improve. You can do that too. And then the sky is the limit. We have a nice idiom there. The sky is the limit. All right, a few more questions. Great. Thank you, Javier. I'm Javier. Okay. Oh, that's a really good one. Anna has asked a great question. I will think about that. Okay, we're here. Just a few checking here. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I think we're going to finish. Let me just get the concluding slides here. All right, concluding thoughts. Well, first of all, what I hope we will learn from this live is to take inventory. When you take inventory, you check what you have and what you don't, what you have in abundance and what you lack. And when we take inventory, then we have awareness of some of the issues. And awareness is the first step towards improvement. If you're not aware that you need to improve, you won't improve. So being aware, hopefully this live has made you aware of some of the issues. And now the fun part begins. We shouldn't judge ourselves. This process of improving should be fun. I enjoy it. I remember a year ago, I didn't want to go in front of a camera. I spent 6 months thinking about doing my first Instagram video. 6 months. And now I enjoy the process of improvement. So enjoy the process of improvement. Don't judge yourself too critically. This journey is short. We might as well enjoy it. No one's perfect. And we just accept that we're going to be imperfect and that we try our best. And then we try to improve. And I think students will give us the benefit of the doubt with this sort of sincere motivation. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it's motivated you to become better teachers or better leaders or better future teachers. And I want to thank you all for a great live. Let me just see. I've gotten 20 more questions here. I don't think we're going to have time to do all of these. So I just want to say one more time, thank you all, and I'll see you next Wednesday here. Bye-bye.